Well, the nomination process, I mean, you don't know anything about that. They don't have other awards. They announce long lists, they announce short lists, and then they announce the winner. And so people know that they've been nominated long before. With the Pulitzer, they don't even call you to make an announcement. You know, I think at 3 o'clock on the second Monday of April, they put out a press release saying these people have won, you know. And I was called by my publisher soon after that, because they had been watching to see if any of their books had won a Pulitzer, and they called me. So it comes out of the blue. It's like a bolt out of the blue, and it was quite shocking, you know. In fact, I had to teach a class the next day, and I had spent the weekend I was going to prepare, and then I sort of blew it off. So that Monday I was, you know, very busy preparing for the class. I'd spent the whole day. I'd been completely absorbed in it, and so I was oblivious to everything except getting my work done. And then the call came, and then I didn't do any work the rest of the day, you know. So, and it was great. I mean, I recommend it. It's really, you know, it was fantastic to win a prize and to get that kind of acknowledgement and stuff. And its immediate aftermath was very busy, and then subsequently it's just sort of been an opportunity for me to sort of go out and give readings and be interviewed, like in this interview and stuff, and to sort of you know, have a presence in the world. And that's unusual for poets, and it's unusual to have it on this level, and it's been fun, and you know, but then the next year there's another Pulitzer Prize winner, and then, you know, like, and life goes on, and a good thing happened to you, but you sort of move on from it and produce. I mean, I think one of the things it did was that it made it difficult for me to develop momentum again in my writing, because you feel like you've arrived at some point all of a sudden, you know, and then those things that motivated you to arrive at that point are no longer there because you've gotten to that point. And so you have to reboot in some way as a writer. You have to start thinking about yourself in terms of new goals and new ideas as to what you're going to do. You know, not that I was writing in order to win prizes. That was never the case. I think all of us, though, write to a certain extent to be acknowledged in some way by the world. And when that acknowledgement comes, then you've arrived at a point, right? And you have to sort of now think about what's next. And I think that's the greatest benefit of the prize. It allows me to sort of really think in a pure way about what I want to do as a writer, you know, and not really think about my relationship to the literary society in which I live, the literary culture in which I live, that I can kind of put that behind me and sort of think about my relationship to the art itself, and what I feel I need to do in relationship to those things that when I was young I really admired, and the writers I admired, and the ones I wanted to kind of emulate and be worthy of, and stuff like that. So, you know, that's a really nice advantage. I think one has to be very careful about language, for my sake, in describing the book, because I don't think it's so much a book about consciousness in the sense that it takes consciousness as a subject,
Right.
in the way you would take, a political event as a subject, or a tree as a subject. I'm going to write about this tree. It sort of enacts consciousness in some way, that the poetry moves in the way consciousness moves. And every once in a while it will refer to consciousness as being a governing element in the way that the poem is arranged and organized. And there is one poem at the end, a long poem, a 15-page poem called Personal Essay, which really is about the movements of consciousness and about the condition of consciousness, the strangeness of being conscious, being aware of yourself and being aware of your environment, and also being aware that you are aware, right? Which is kind of that sort of infinite regress of consciousness. I'm conscious, and I'm conscious that I'm conscious, and I'm conscious that I'm conscious that I'm conscious. And what a mysterious and strange thing that is, and trying to puzzle out what it means and what it signifies. So, yeah, I think the interesting thing about saying something is about consciousness is that you can't make consciousness an object. Consciousness is that which makes other things objects, right? Consciousness is that element that is conscious of something. So when it's conscious of itself, it also escapes itself, And so there's a philosophical conundrum at the heart of that book. But yeah, it is. I guess I would say that it's really sort of involved in consciousness. And to the other part of your question, which is quite interesting, it's not a big subject because it's the closest subject to us in some way. You can slip into consciousness, If you take a book like Ulysses, which is of course written in what is called stream of consciousness, it's very, very easy, I think. It was very easy for Joyce to write in that way because he could just slip into the stream of associations that we're all living in, when you're listening to me answer that question, there are 1,000 things going on in your mind, right? And that's a part of this stream, this living stream, which is the most immediate thing in the world for you. The thing that is the closest to you is this stream of thought and activity, mental activity, that is taking place while you're listening to me, while you're walking around, while you're doing a number of other things. And all you have to do is sort of follow that stream, right? So if you're enacting consciousness on the page, that's basically just what you're doing. And so it's the opposite of difficult somehow, and it's the opposite of large in some way. It's so close to you. I think Ulysses is very, very dense, but he keeps things together in Ulysses through those dense periods where it's just a stream of consciousness by making sure the reader knows what's happening to the person who is experiencing this, So if you have Stephen Dedalus walking along the Strand, you're always coming back to images that locate him in time and space, and within a narrative framework he's walking along the beach and he's looking at stuff. And so the way in which the chaos of consciousness is managed on the page is that there's a buried underlying structure of narrative, which is certainly what happens in personal essay, right? Personal essay is very, very digressive in the way consciousness is digressive, but it keeps coming back. It keeps circling around back to certain themes, and it will, and there's a place where I will kind of stop. And so that's the thing. You have to develop a sort of dialectical relationship between things that are moving outward, and things that are conforming and coming back inward to a certain point in the timeline, a certain point in space and a certain point in the movement of the theme. So a lot of that kind of sense that this is just a stream of consciousness is illusionistic. If you kind of look more closely, there are a lot of reference points and there are a lot of places where the poem is grounded. The themes are various, but they're sort of also specific to me in that I've been thinking about them a long time. So even though they seem unusual in relationship to each other in the poems, the underlying principle by which they're made to work together in a poem really has to do with the fact that I've always been thinking about these things. I've always been thinking about, say, the imaginary number in mathematics as a kind of symbol of the soul in some way. And I've always been kind of yoking together in my own mind these disparate elements to the point where they seem to be able to relate to each other symbiotically. And so they work organically on the page because they work organically in my mind, And that just really is a question of, well, if you ask how is that done, it's simply a question of embodying in the poem the essential features of your mind. Because our minds are really very various, and we're thinking profound thoughts about the universe, and then we're also thinking about our laundry, right? And somehow the only question that involves how to get these sort of disparate elements together is a question of form. Can you find a form in which these things fit? And if there's a sort of formal inevitability to the poem, whether that inevitability is given by narrative, or whether it's given by lyrical structure, for example, rhyming and quatrains and stuff, once you have that formal inevitability, then you can bring together all sorts of things that otherwise wouldn't be related to each other at all, simply because the frame is so strong that it can hold these creatures that are very different within it. I'm writing poems, and that's kind of fun, and I'm putting a book together, and I'm doing some translations, and I'm also writing prose memoir, which is difficult and arduous, but I feel that I have a story to tell, an interesting one. So I'm working on that, and hopefully I'll get that book done by the end of this year, and then hopefully finish a book of poems by the end of next year, 2016. And I'm also translating. I'm doing a lot.